I'm going to be installing OpenBSD 5.2 onto my ThinkPad, my IBM Thinkpad T30. It's a standard ThinkPad without any additions, so it's 40 gigabytes of hard drive and 256 megabytes of RAM. It's now January 2013, so the latest OpenBSD release is OpenBSD 5.2. Now, to get it, let's click on Get Releases, and it tells you that if you want to install OpenBSD with a CD-ROM you burn yourself, you download one of the following ISOs from our mirrors: the minimal cd52.iso or the install52.iso to burn a 230 megabyte CD. That's what I usually choose, and I usually go for FTP instead of the HTTP mirrors. And I go for the US mirrors usually. So I'll just pick this one. And ideally you should use an FTP client. And I use FileZilla, which you can download at this web address, filezilla-project.org. And you could go to the download FileZilla client link here. And I'm using Mac OS X, so I would click on this. I'm using Intel. If you use Windows, you can click on this link instead. Or if you use Linux, you can click on this link. I've already installed FileZilla already. Now what you do is you copy over this FTP link and then you open FileZilla and you paste it into the host. Then you click on Quick Connect. And you're connected to the remote site. And I'm going to download this ISO file to my downloads folder. Go to the latest release 5.2. Then go to the architecture that you are installing on. So for the ThinkPad T30 is Intel 386. Just expand this. And I want the install 52. I want this one. And I double click it to start downloading. And then it'll start downloading. And you can see it's going pretty fast. It says about 40 something minutes left. Okay, I've finished downloading the installation ISO for OpenBSD. Now we have to burn it onto a CD-ROM. Make sure you do not do this. You do not right-click and then select burn install 52.iso to disk, because what that will do is to actually burn the ISO to the CD-ROM. That isn't what you want. You want to burn the ISO as an image to the CD-ROM, not to burn it as a file. So the proper way to do it is to go to your Launchpad and then open up Disk Utility. Go to File, Open Disk Image, and then select the ISO file. Then on Disk Utility, you see here on the left-hand column you have this new item, install 52.iso. If you right-click on it, then there's an option to burn. And that's what you need to do. Right-click on install 52.iso and then click on burn ISO. I'm going to turn the speed down to 8. here it says burning image, install 52.iso, and that's what you want. You want to burn the image. You don't want to actually burn the file. I'm going to install OpenBSD 5.2 onto this ThinkPad T30 now. So I'm going to boot it up right now. And the first thing I do is to press F12, preparing the boot device list. And this is the boot menu. I need to make sure that the ThinkPad boots up with the CD-ROM drive and not with the hard drive. And you can see that the CD-ROM drive is the first option in this boot menu. So that's what we want to choose, the CD-ROM drive. So I'll open up the CD-ROM drive and now put in the OpenBSD 5.2 CD-ROM, which I have just burned. Now I'll put that in. And then make sure that the first option is selected, the CD-ROM drive. And press enter. And now it's going to boot up using the CD-ROM drive. And now it presents me with three options to install, upgrade, or enter the shell. Well, the usual option is to choose install because we're installing this OpenBSD system. So I type in I for install and press enter. Now it asks to choose my keyboard layout, and usually for these questions you can just go with the default, and the default option is actually shown after the question, and it's shown in square brackets. So I'll just go with the default and press enter, and it asks for a system host name, and you can type it in. So I'll call my system OpenBSD. Enter. And I asked, which available network interface do you want to configure? Ideally, I could configure WI0, which is the wireless interface, but I've tried it many times before during the installation, and it doesn't seem to work. The only network interface that seems to work during the installation is the FXP0, which is the Ethernet port. So I'll type in FXP0 instead of WI0 and then press enter to configure it. Then it asks what IP4 address do I want for FXP0, and the default is DHCP. I'm connected to a wireless, a router, a Netgear router, which automatically assigns IP4 addresses to connected computers. So I'll just pick DHCP. Enter. And you see, it's already been assigned a IP4 address to my computer. Now it asks what IP6 address do I want for this network interface, and I don't use IP6, so I say none and press enter, and this is the default. Then it asks whether I want to configure any further network interfaces, and in my case, I don't want to, because I know that the WI0 doesn't work, so I select done, enter. Now it asks for a password for the root account. The root account is of course the most powerful account, the administrator account. So you need to set a good password for this. So I'll type in a password, enter, and then it'll ask for the password again. So you type it in again, press enter. Then it asks whether you want to start SSHD by default. And the default answer is yes, so I would go with yes as well. Start NTPD by default, no. Well, the default is no, so just press enter. And do you expect to run the X window system? The default is yes, and you should pick yes because you're quite likely to want to use the X window system, which is a graphical user interface. So you press enter. Do you want to start the X window system to be started by XDM? Well, XDM is a graphical user interface for the login, and I would usually pick no because I don't need a graphical interface just for a simple logging in. So I press enter, no. Set up a user. Well, I would set up a user. What they're talking about is a non-root user. It's very important and useful to set up a normal non-root user on OpenBSD. So I would just set one up now. And it's usual just to use your name for the username. So I'll use my own name. Enter. Full username. I'll use the same one. Enter. And password. Now I put in my password. Enter. Since you set up a user, disable SSHD logins to root. Yes, that is a good idea because otherwise there would be a security loophole. Enter. And what time zone are you in? And I live in Asia, Hong Kong, and that's what's already given here as the default, so I would press enter here. But if you live in another time zone and you don't see it as the default, what you would do is hit a question mark and press enter to see a list of what time zones there are. But in my situation, Asia, Hong Kong is where I live. So I press enter. Now ask for which disk is the root disk. And what they are talking about is the disk on which OpenBSD will be installed. So you want to install it on your internal hard drive on the Thinkpad T30. And this hard drive is named WD0. So that's already stated as the option, so I press enter. And it says use DUIDs rather than device names in FSTAB. The default is yes, and you should just go with it. Yes. Now ask whether to use the whole disk or use the OpenBSD area or edit the MBR. And I happen to have an OpenBSD area on this hard disk because I've installed an older version of OpenBSD 5.1 on this computer. That's why there is already a OpenBSD partition. But in the usual case, I'm guessing that you have Windows installed on it. So if that's the case, the easiest thing to do is just to use the whole hard drive. Wipe out the hard drive and let OpenBSD take it over. So I'll pick W, is use the whole disk, and I press enter. So this will wipe out the entire hard drive. And now it asks to set up the file system. First, you see here is the base, then there's a swap, then there's the TMP temporary file directories, VAR, user, etc., and then the home directory. This is the basic file system for OpenBSD. And the easiest thing to do is just to go with auto layout. So that's A, which is already stated as the default option. So we press enter. And now it is formatting the hard drive, partitioning it, and then placing in the basic file system layout for OpenBSD. Okay, so it's finished up formatting, partitioning, and setting up the basic file system. And now it's asking to install the sets. Now, sets are actually package sets, which are very basic packages that you will usually need to run the OpenBSD operating system properly. So you will want to install them. And it asks you where is the location. Now, I've downloaded the installation 230 megabyte installation CD, so the package sets are actually inside the CD. So I select CD, which is already the option. And the full name of the CD-ROM device is CD0. So I'll press enter, CD0. And now it will ask for the path names of the package sets, and the correct path name is 5.2/i386, so I'll press enter. And here it gives you a default selection of package sets, which is appropriate already to the Thinkpad T30. You can see that bsd.mp, which is here, is not selected. And the reason why I don't select it is that bsd.mp is the kernel, the operating system kernel for multiprocessor systems. And of course, the Thinkpad T30 is not a multiprocessor system, so you don't need that kernel. As for the rest, you need it. There's the kernel, which is BSD. There's the base packages. The etc is the configuration files. Man are the man pages, which are manuals. Game, you could or could not have it. Xbase is the base for the X server, which is the graphical user interface. XETC is the configuration files for the X server. Xshare are some shared files for the X server. Xfont are the fonts for use in the graphical user interface, and X server is also part of the X server, which is the graphical user interface. So the easiest thing to do is to just go with this default and press done. And now it starts off by installing the kernel. So it's finished installing those sets, and it asks again for location of sets. And of course we're done installing, so we just pick done. And now it's indicated that OpenBSD has finished installing and is completed. And you can see that this whole process has taken about 17 minutes. And this is the newest version of OpenBSD, which was released in November 2012. And I'm installing this on a very old ThinkPad T30, which doesn't have any... It hasn't been changed, the RAM or the hard drive, so it's running on the standard 40 gigabyte hard drive and only 256 megabytes of RAM. And yet the entire installation of this newest version of OpenBSD in January 2013 has only taken about 17 minutes. So this is an indication of how efficient and lightweight the OpenBSD system is. Now it says to boot into the new system, enter reboot at the command prompt. So I'll type in reboot and press enter. Oh, and you should take the CD-ROM out of the system first before you reboot. So I'm taking out the CD-ROM. I should have done that before I put in reboot. Alright, so it's successfully booted up, and now it shows me the login prompt. So I'll log in with the non-root user, and I'll put in my password, and I'm logged in. And now just to check that the internet works, I'll do a ping of a popular website. And you can see the ping is working. So this shows that the internet is working. Alright, and next I'll just test out the X server, which is the graphical user interface. So I type in start X, press enter, and I'll see if this works without any configuration. And here you can see it does work. I haven't done any configuration, and it just works off the bat. This is the FVWM, or the FV window manager, which is a very basic graphical user interface window manager. and if you can go into the menu by doing a left click, and you can select things like the X terminal or utilities. It's very basic, so you might want to set up a more sophisticated window manager if you like later on. I'll just exit out of the window manager. Now that I've booted up successfully, I'll just show you how to shut down the computer. To shut down the computer, you have to switch to the root user, and you do that by typing SU, and then you have to type in the root user's password. Once you get there, then you type in the command shutdown H now. You press enter. Then it says system shutdown time has arrived. Shutdown complete. Syncing disk. It says press any key to reboot. Once you see that, that means this computer is ready to be switched off. Then you can press on the power button on the ThinkPad and hold it down until the system turns off. So it's off. So I've showed you how to get OpenBSD from the internet, how to burn the CD-ROM, and how to boot it up, install it, and how to boot it up the first time. And I've also shown you how to shut down the system. On my next video, I'll show you the first steps you should take after you boot it up for the first time to set up the system properly so that you can use it.